Today's story is about an aerospace engineer who spent 6 years being the invisible man in his own marriage. He paid the bills, fixed the problems, and got compared to his brother-in-law at every single family dinner. The brother-in-law drove a leased Lamborghini, called himself a real estate mogul, and was secretly running a Ponzi scheme built on his own parents' drained retirement accounts and a public pension fund for teachers and firefighters. One night, doing routine compliance work, this man found something he was never supposed to find. And at his in-laws' 40th anniversary party, in front of the billionaire his brother-in-law was trying to impress, he detonated all of it. Let's get into it. "Say sorry to my brother or leave my house," my wife demanded at dinner. So I stood up, walked over to him, and said the one sentence that destroyed 3 marriages, including ours. "I'm Owen, I'm 36, and the night my marriage ended started with a toast and a folded napkin, and finished with a federal fraud case, 3 divorces, and one very yellow Lamborghini that turned out to be a lease the whole time." Let me back up. I work as a senior aerospace engineer at a facility outside of Seattle. Sounds impressive. The day-to-day is pretty quiet. I mostly stare at screens, monitoring telemetry data for communication satellites. High stakes in a specific way. 1 decimal point off in my calculations, and a piece of equipment worth $300 million becomes expensive space debris. But it's not the kind of thing that wows anyone at a dinner party. At the office, people call me the surgeon. My boss, Dr. Harmon, a man who's been sending metal into orbit since the Apollo era, shakes my hand like it actually means something. When I talk in meetings, the room goes quiet. I am respected. I am competent. I solve problems most people don't even know exist. At home, I was Nicole's husband, or in her family's eyes, the boring one with the government job. Nicole is beautiful. Was, technically still is, but it doesn't hit the same way once you've seen who a person actually is. 6 years of marriage had put this sharp, brittle edge on everything she did. Always slightly disappointed, nothing ever quite enough. And the person most responsible for setting that standard was her older brother, Craig. Craig is 42. 2 white teeth, 2 orange tan, drives a bright yellow Lamborghini, and posts hustle culture videos online like it's a personality. He calls himself a real estate mogul. He treats me like I'm there to validate his parking. And for 6 straight years, I got compared to him at every family gathering, every holiday, every cookout, sometimes directly to my face, sometimes just loud enough that I'd catch it from across the room. Craig did this. Craig built that. Why can't you be more like Craig? 2 weeks before everything blew up, I came home with actual good news for once. Dr. Harmon had pulled me aside about a lead project manager position on a new Department of Defense contract. Real step up, significant raise. I walked through the front door loosening my tie, ready to share it. Nicole was in the kitchen, scrubbing a glass with the energy of someone who'd been storing up grievances since noon. She didn't look up. "We have dinner at my parents' Sunday," she said. "Planning meeting for their 40th anniversary party. Please make an effort this time." I asked what that meant. "Don't just stand in the corner talking about satellites and math. Engage with them, and get a new suit. Craig is bringing important guests, and I don't want you looking like you work in IT support." I told her I was up for a big promotion. She blinked at me with this flat, vague disinterest. "Does it come with a company car, or are you still driving the Honda?" I said it came with a salary increase and some respect. "Good," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Maybe we can finally redo the kitchen. Craig just dropped 50 grand on a smart home system. You walk in, and the house literally greets you." Then she hit me with the actual news. Craig was bringing Charles Hargrove to the anniversary party. Charles Hargrove, the billionaire investor. Craig had apparently convinced him to back a new waterfront development. The whole family was buzzing. Daddy was so proud. Everything had to be perfect. "Just try to be impressive," Nicole said. "Or if you can't be impressive, just be invisible." Be invisible. I paid the mortgage. I filed the taxes every year without complaint. I handled the property line dispute with the neighbor. I drove her mother to eye surgery when Craig couldn't be bothered to show up. I fixed every leaky faucet in that house and never once made a thing of it. I was the foundation, and nobody looks at the foundation. They look at the chandelier. Craig was the chandelier. Flashy, expensive, and hanging by a much thinner thread than anyone realized. Hold on, let me jump in here. For anyone listening, this is me, not Owen. I need to paint Craig's full picture before we move on, because real estate mogul doesn't do the man justice. Craig is what you get when a guy with a borrowed lifestyle and a spray tan genuinely believes his own pitch. He's basically Jordan Belfort from Wolf of Wall Street, except instead of penny stocks, he's been robbing his own parents. And what he did to Owen every single family gathering, the constant comparisons, the public digs, that's not confidence. That's a man who needs someone beneath him to feel tall. We can call him what he is, Captain Fake Equity. Anyway, it gets worse. Let's go to Memorial Day. To understand why that Be Invisible line got under my skin the way it did, you need the full picture of what 6 years with this family actually felt like on the ground. Memorial Day last summer. The Caldwell family gatherings are always a production. Craig's mother, Linda, treats a backyard cookout like an event requiring a seating chart and a dress code. I was at the grill, sweating through my shirt, because Craig, who was supposed to be manning the station, decided it was too hot outside and went in to get a lemonade. So there I was, flipping 20 steaks, trying to get them all medium rare exactly how Frank liked them. It was a Tuesday. Wait, no. Memorial Day, so Monday. Anyway, doesn't matter. Craig walked back out wearing white linen pants and loafers that cost more than my first car. He had an audience, a couple of cousins, plus Dana, Nicole's younger sister. He called out loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Don't burn them this time. I got those at a butcher shop in the city. Wagyu. Don't turn them into hockey pucks." I kept my eyes on the grill. They're under control. He walked over and grabbed my wrist, lifting my arm to look at my watch. It was a Seiko. My dad gave it to me before he passed. And yeah, I still have it, before anyone asks. Practical, reliable, nothing fancy. Craig held it up for the cousins to see. "Still wearing the ticking time bomb? You're an engineer, man. Get an Apple Watch. That thing looks like a cereal box prize." The cousins did the nervous laugh, the one people do when they know someone's being a jerk, but don't want to be the one to say it. "My dad gave me this watch," I said, pulling my arm back. "Sentimental value doesn't tell time any better," Craig said. Then, just to twist it a little more, "You need a loan to upgrade your style? I know things have been tight for you guys." Things were tight because Nicole had spent $6,000 on a life coaching retreat Craig recommended in Sedona. Things were tight because I was maxing out retirement contributions while paying down her student loans. I didn't say any of that. I just held the tongs and kept going. I looked over at Nicole by the pool. She'd heard the whole thing. She glanced up, caught my expression, and gave this small wave, the dismissive kind, the "let it go, don't make a scene" wave. 2 seconds and she'd summed up 6 years of marriage in a single gesture. That was the dynamic. Craig was the golden child. Dropped out of college. Too creative for the system. Cheated on his first wife. She didn't understand his drive. Lost a pile of money on a bad investment. Risk taker. Visionary. Me? I was the utility player. The one Frank called when his Wi-Fi went down. The one Linda called to move furniture before the holidays. But at the dinner table, I was the punchline. Whatever I achieved, Craig had done something bigger. I finished my master's degree. Craig just closed a major deal. I got a safety award at work. Craig bought a new toy. After the steak incident, I was cleaning the grill when Greg found me. Greg is Dana's husband, tax attorney, quiet guy, always looks vaguely apologetic for existing. He handed me a soda. We had an understanding between us, an unspoken one. Outsider club. "He's in rare form today," Greg said, nodding toward the house. I said what I'd been thinking for years, out loud for the first time. Greg looked around, then leaned in. He'd looked over some contracts for Craig the previous month, a condo development. The LLCs were all registered to P.O. boxes in Nevada. The initial capital hadn't come from a bank. It came from private equity, but the signatures were messy, desperate looking. Greg had tried to tell Dana they shouldn't invest their kid's college fund in Craig's next round, and she'd nearly taken his head off. Said he was jealous. "Did you invest?" I asked. Greg looked down at his shoes. $10,000. "To keep the peace," he said. I knew it then, even before I found the proof later. A decent man pressured into throwing his kid's future into a hole just to keep Sunday dinner civil. Wait, pause for a second. For the listeners, this is me, not Owen. Greg just told us he handed $10,000 of his kid's college fund to his brother-in-law to avoid an argument. That is the saddest tax attorney story ever told. And here's what gets me. Notice what Owen did with that information. He didn't blow up. He didn't start a barbecue argument. He just filed it away and kept grilling. That's not patience. That's a chess player sitting at a checkers table, waiting for everyone else to figure out what game they're actually playing. He already knew how this would end. Anyway, the audit files are up next, and this is where things get federal. The night before the anniversary party, I was in my home office, a converted guest room Nicole was constantly threatening to turn into a meditation space, working late on a stack of files from work. We were auditing the insurance policies for an upcoming satellite launch. The coverage was backed by a big pension fund, the state teachers and first responders retirement trust, actuarial tables, risk assessments, asset allocations, the kind of stuff that puts most people to sleep. But I like patterns. I find comfort in numbers. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't tell you to be invisible. I was cross-referencing the fund's high-risk portfolio when a name came up on the screen. Caldwell Development Group, Holdings LLC. I blinked, took a sip of cold coffee, and leaned in closer. Caldwell. That's Nicole's family name. That's Craig's last name. I started digging. The pension fund had allocated $20 million to Craig's company for a mixed-use commercial zone in downtown. I drove past that lot every single day going to work. Empty weeds and a rusty chain-link fence. No construction, no permits filed anywhere. I sat back in my chair. Why would a conservative pension fund for teachers and firefighters invest $20 million in a dirt lot owned by a guy who barely graduated high school? I followed the paper trail. The collateral for the loan was listed as verified assets from a parent company. I followed that to a shell company in the Caymans, then one in Delaware, then back to a guarantor listed as Frank Caldwell, my father-in-law. My heart started hammering against my ribs. Frank was a retired dentist, comfortable, nice house, golf membership. But guaranteeing a $20 million loan? I pulled up the property records on his house, then his vacation cabin, then, because I'd done their taxes 2 years earlier and still had read-only access to the archived files, his retirement accounts. Drained. All of it. Leveraged to the absolute limit. It wasn't just a bad investment. Craig had emptied his own parents to fake solvency, used that fake solvency to secure a massive loan from the pension fund, and was using the pension money to pay interest on the personal debts he owed to his parents' accounts. Classic Ponzi structure, but with a particularly ugly twist. He was robbing firefighters and teachers to pay for his leased Lamborghini. I felt genuinely sick. Clock said 2 a.m. Upstairs, Nicole was asleep, probably dreaming about impressing billionaires, maybe finally redoing the kitchen. I had a choice. Stay invisible, go to the party the next day, eat the food, smile at the insults, and wait for the federal agents to eventually knock on someone else's door. Or I could stand up. The thing is, it wasn't really a choice once I thought it through clearly. My name was on the compliance checks for our aerospace company. If it came out that I'd found this and stayed silent, that the pension fund backing our launch coverage was being looted by my own brother-in-law, my security clearance would get yanked. My career would be done. Everything I'd actually earned, gone. It was me or him. I went to the closet. I pulled out my suit, the charcoal gray one, the IT support one Nicole hated. I brushed it off, clean, sharp, fit me perfectly. I didn't need a new suit. I needed a new life. Okay, stop. This is me, not Owen. He just spent 2 hours at 2 a.m. tracing a shell company through the Caymans to his own father-in-law's drained retirement account while doing routine compliance work. For context, that's like taking out the trash and accidentally finding a crime scene. This man found a $20 million Ponzi scheme buried in actuarial tables. That's Michael Scofield from Prison Break Energy. Except instead of tattooing blueprints on his body, he just read the spreadsheet. And his decision? Show up to the party anyway. In the suit she hated. I need you to understand that what's about to happen is not an accident. It is deliberate, every single second of it. Pull up a chair. Morning of the party, the house was already at a low boil. Nicole was in frenzy mode, aggressively fluffing throw pillows we were leaving behind anyway. She scanned me up and down when I came downstairs in my suit. I thought I asked you to buy something new. Work was crazy, launch protocols. Always the work. She waved it off. Fine. Just try to stand toward the back during the photos. The shimmer on that fabric looks cheap. I picked up the car keys. Didn't say a word. Enjoy the view while you can, I thought. The drive to Frank and Linda's was completely silent. Nicole spent the whole ride checking her makeup and texting Dana. I drove with this strange, flat calm. The feeling you get right before a rocket test, when the countdown is already done and the physics are already set, and whatever happens next isn't in your hands anymore. We pulled up to the estate. Sprawling house in a gated community. Too many columns. Luxury cars lined the driveway. And right in front of the fountain, taking up 2 spots like it owned the place, was the yellow Lamborghini. Nicole actually clutched her chest. He got it. Owen, look at that. That is success. It's a car, I said, and put the Honda in park next to a landscaping truck. You're just jealous. The front door swung open, and there was Craig, holding a glass of sparkling water, wearing a tuxedo with a velvet jacket. He looked like a Bond villain from a movie nobody greenlit twice. Nicole ran up and hugged him. Craig caught my eye over her shoulder. Custom paint job, he said. Cost more than Owen's annual salary, probably. Then, nice suit, man. You borrow that from a funeral director? Happy anniversary, I said. Where are your parents? He told me they were inside with Hargrove, then dropped his voice like he was letting me in on something. The big man is here. Listen, Owen, stay out of the way tonight. Hargrove is old school. He doesn't want to hear about space toys. He wants to talk real business. I nodded and walked past him into the house. The foyer was full of white roses. I'd estimate 10 grand worth of flowers just in that one room. String quartet in the corner. Waiters circulating with trays. And I knew from the audit the night before that Frank had missed a property tax payment on this house last month, that Linda's credit card was maxed out. This entire party was being funded by debt backed by stolen pension money, and it looked gorgeous. I found Greg at the bar, nursing a coffee, looking like a man attending his own sentencing. You survived the front door, he said. Barely. The Lamborghini's yellow. Greg dropped his voice. It's a lease. I heard him on the phone this morning. Short-term corporate lease. He's telling everyone he paid cash. I looked at him directly. Greg, does Dana know about the inheritance trust? Your grandmother's account, the one set aside for the kids. He went pale. Why? Check it Monday, promise me. He stared at me, something shifting in his face. Owen, what do you know? Not here. Just then the room went quiet. Frank and Linda were descending the grand staircase. Linda in diamonds, Frank with his strained smile, waving like royalty. And next to them, walking with a cane, and the air of someone who'd already calculated everyone's net worth and found it lacking, was Charles Hargrove. 70s. Cold blue eyes that scanned the room the way radar scans a horizon. Not impressed by the flowers or the quartet? Not impressed by much, from what I could tell. Craig rushed over to lead the introductions. Applause. Nicole clapped so hard her hands must have stung. She mouthed "smile" at me from across the room. I gave her a grimace and looked back at Hargrove. He didn't smile. He nodded once and looked like he'd already rather be somewhere else. We filed into the dining room, gold-embossed name cards. I found mine at the far end, near the kitchen door, across from a teenage cousin wearing headphones who was definitely not going to be making conversation. Craig was at the head of the table to Hargrove's right, Nicole next to Craig. The chair at my spot was wobbly. Of course it was. I reached into my jacket pocket and touched the flash drive I'd brought just in case. Didn't need it. The full PDF was already sitting in Hargrove's email, the routing numbers memorized. But it felt right to have it there. Dinner progressed. Craig got louder with every course. He made a joke about a cousin's weight. He cracked one about Greg's hairline that landed like a slap. The food was excellent and tasted like ash in my mouth. And then, right as the main course arrived, Craig stood up and tapped his glass with a fork. I want to propose a toast to Mom and Dad. 40 years. That's a real achievement. Here, here, murmurs around the table. But I also want to give a special shout out to my sister Nicole, because marriage is hard, especially when you're the one carrying the dead weight. The room went dead silent. That wasn't a joke. That was something else. I mean, look at Owen, Craig continued, slurring just slightly. He's a nice guy, serviceable. But Nicole Caldwell deserves a king, not a serf. I said it 6 years ago. This guy is a Honda Civic. You need a Ferrari. And look where we are. Still pushing papers at that government job, still driving that same junker, while I'm about to change the skyline of this city. He smiled and dropped the final note. I've got a friend coming to town next week. Developer from Miami. Single, doing extremely well. Just saying. My blood went cold. He'd just openly suggested, in front of the entire family and a major investor, that my wife should leave me for his friend. I looked at Nicole. This was the moment. The moment 6 years of marriage would mean something. The moment she'd put her hand on the table and say something that mattered. I waited. 1 second. 2. 3. Nicole looked down at her plate. She picked up her water glass and took a long, slow sip. She said nothing. Yo, time out. For anyone listening, this is me, not Owen. I need every single person to sit with what just happened. Her husband just got told to his face by her brother, in front of their whole family and a billionaire, that he was dead weight and she should upgrade. And she picked up her glass and said nothing. That silence was a 6-year decision, compressed into 3 seconds. She didn't defend him because some part of her agreed with the sentiment. That's not a wife keeping the peace. That's a woman who's been living in Plan B for a while. Owen saw it too. That's the chain snapping right there. And what happens next is exactly why you're still listening. That silence broke something in me, not my heart, that had been cracking for a long time. It was my restraint, the thing that had kept me at the grill, kept me smiling at the insults, kept me paying the mortgage without complaint for 6 years. It snapped. I looked at Hargrove. He was watching the whole scene with barely disguised contempt. Not for me, for Craig's complete lack of class. He didn't know the half of it yet. Craig, I said. Not loud, just calm. The kind of voice that cuts through a room because it isn't raised. Craig cupped his ear theatrically. Oh, the Civic speaks. What's that? Engine trouble? I think you should sit down, I said, pushing my chair back. Before you say something that sends you to federal prison. The smirk disappeared. Excuse me? I stood up slowly, adjusted my cuffs, completely calm. The way you feel when you've already run the calculation and you know the result. Your partners aren't deep-pocketed, I said. They're the state teachers' retirement trust, and they didn't invest. You forged the collateral documents using your father's drained retirement accounts to secure a fraudulent loan. Every ounce of air left the room. Nicole grabbed my arm. Sit down. You're drunk. I haven't had a drop. I shook her hand off. I walked toward the head of the table. Craig's expression cycled through confusion, then rage. He's insane. Dad, call security. Get him out of here. I stopped right next to Hargrove, looked directly at him, not Craig. Mr. Hargrove, do you check your email on weekends? Something shifted in Hargrove's expression. I do. I sent you a PDF about an hour ago. It contains the routing numbers for the $20 million transferred to Caldwell Development Group. Page 4 shows those funds were immediately wired to a shell company in the Caymans, then funneled back to cover Craig's personal debts, including the lease on the yellow Lamborghini in the driveway. Hargrove pulled out his phone. Craig lunged. Don't look at that. He's lying. He's a jealous, low-level engineer who doesn't understand how real business works. Hargrove raised one hand. Just one. Craig stopped dead. Hargrove scrolled, swiped, zoomed in. Then he set the phone on the table and looked at Craig the way a butcher looks at a cut of meat. Craig, he said, voice quiet and ice cold. Is this your signature on the transfer authorization? It's creative financing, Bridge Capital. I was going to pay it back once the pre-sales came through. You used my name, Hargrove said. You told the pension fund I was a co-guarantor. That's how you got the rate. That is wire fraud. That is identity theft. And that is stealing from my reputation. Craig turned to Frank. Dad, tell him we're good for it. Tell him. Frank looked gray, one hand pressed to his chest. Craig, you told me the accounts were safe. You said it was a liquidity proof. You signed the papers, Dad. You signed them! And then the room came apart. Frank slumped in his chair. Linda started screaming. Monica, Craig's wife, stood up and hurled her glass at him. It shattered against the wall. Craig was sweating through his tuxedo. And Nicole stood up. I turned to her. I expected horror. I expected her to come to me. Instead, her face was pure hatred. "You ruined it," she said, voice shaking. "You ruined the deal. How could you do this to my family? He's a criminal, Nicole. He was stealing from people. He had a plan. He was going to fix it. You're just jealous because he's successful and you're nothing. A boring, miserable little man." She pointed at me with a shaking finger. "Apologize to my brother right now. Say sorry and mean it, or get out of my house." The whole room waited. I looked at Craig, trembling, forehead soaked. I looked at Hargrove, who was watching me with something close to respect. I looked at Nicole, the woman I'd spent 8 years trying to build something real with, and I realized she didn't love me. She loved the stability I provided, and resented the person who provided it. She wanted the criminal's lifestyle with the engineer's safety net, and that wasn't something I could fix. I walked over to Craig and leaned in close. "I'm not sorry," I said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "But you will be, because I forwarded that email to the FBI Cybercrimes Division 10 minutes ago." Craig's knees gave out. He literally collapsed into his chair. I turned back to Nicole. "And for the record, it's our house. I pay the mortgage, but you can keep it. You're going to need the asset to pay for your brother's legal defense." I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly, set it on the table. "Happy anniversary," I said to Frank and Linda, and I walked out. All right, real talk. This is me, not Owen. He just walked into a party where he was told to stand in the back of the photos, sat at the wobbly chair by the kitchen door, watched his wife's brother tell the whole table she should upgrade, and he responded by quoting routing numbers from memory and handing a billionaire a federal fraud case on his phone. He didn't raise his voice once. He didn't throw anything. He folded his napkin. Most guys blow up years earlier or never say a word. Owen waited, built the case, and struck at the exact moment it would matter most. In front of the one person Craig was trying to impress. That's not revenge. That's project management with a grudge. Now, the aftermath. Final update. Walking out of that house was the hardest and easiest thing I've ever done simultaneously. My legs felt like lead. My chest felt lighter than it had in years. Both at the same time, which is a strange combination. I could hear the screaming starting up again behind the front door. Linda wailing, Nicole's voice shrill and panicked, and Hargrove's low, controlled tone as he presumably called his legal team to start dismantling Craig before the feds even arrived. I drove to a motel on the interstate. Not a hotel, a motel. I needed to be somewhere anonymous. Somewhere I was just a guy in a room and not someone's husband or in-law. I sat on the lumpy bed and stared at the wall. My phone vibrated constantly. Nicole, Nicole, Frank, Nicole, unknown number, Craig, almost certainly. I turned it off. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I turned the phone back on. 74 missed calls, and one voicemail from Greg. It was a war zone, he said. Police had come. Hargrove pressed charges immediately. They took Craig out in cuffs around 11. Frank was in the hospital. Minor heart attack, stress-induced. And Nicole was telling anyone who'd listen that I'd hacked Craig's accounts and planted evidence. "Get a lawyer," Greg said. "A shark. I'm texting you a number." I called the number. A guy named Walsh, short, bald, had the energy of a pit bull wearing a suit. We met at a diner an hour later. I laid everything out, the files, the financial records, 6 years of documentation showing my contributions versus Nicole's spending. Walsh stirred his coffee and looked at the papers. "Good news, you're the whistleblower. You're the hero in the eyes of the law. Bad news, your wife is going to try to burn you down. We file for divorce today, and we throw in financial infidelity. She was funneling marital funds into her brother's scheme." Was she actually? I asked, genuinely not sure at that point. "We'll find out," Walsh said. "Discovery is a beautiful thing." The next few weeks blurred together. The story broke locally, then nationally. Footage of Craig being let out of the police station in an orange jumpsuit instead of a velvet tuxedo. He looked small. He looked terrified. The golden child had tarnished fast. Monica filed for divorce 3 days after the arrest and took the kids to her parents' place. Greg confronted Dana about the accounts. When she admitted she'd wired Craig another $50,000 from the kids' college fund, the week before the party of all times. Greg packed a bag and moved into my motel room for a week before getting his own place. 3 marriages, gone in about 2 weeks flat. Nicole refused to leave the house. She changed the locks. She sent emails accusing me of emotional abuse for humiliating her family. But then came the asset division hearing. Walsh laid it all out clean. Spreadsheets, receipts, 6 years of documentation showing I'd paid 90% of the mortgage. And then the key piece. Nicole had secretly withdrawn $40,000 from our joint savings over the past 2 years and wired it directly to Craig's company. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with zero patience for anything, looked straight at Nicole. "Is it true you transferred joint funds to a company now under federal indictment for fraud?" Nicole cried. "Said it was an investment. He was going to pay them back double." "It was theft," the judge said. "You stole from your husband to fund a criminal enterprise." Gavel came down. I got the order to sell the house and keep 80% of the proceeds to recover my losses. Nicole got her car and her credit card debt. She found me in the hallway outside. "I hate you," she said. "You destroyed my family." "Your brother destroyed your family," I said. I just turned on the lights. The months after the divorce were quiet, in a way I hadn't felt in years. Small apartment downtown, mine alone. No throw pillows I wasn't allowed to touch. No passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. Dr. Harmon called me in the week after the story broke, and I walked into his office bracing for bad news. He shook my hand instead. The board was impressed, he said. I'd saved the pension fund millions and shown integrity. That's the kind of man they wanted leading the defense contract. Promotion. Salary jumped to $185,000 plus bonuses. I bought a new watch, an Omega, not because Craig told me to, because I wanted to celebrate my own time. My time was mine now. 6 months after the party, I was at a bookstore looking for a book on orbital mechanics. I reached for a title and another hand reached for the same one at the same time. A woman with kind eyes and slightly messy hair looked up and smiled. "Sorry, didn't think anyone else read this stuff." "I do," I said. "I'm Owen." "Claire. I teach physics at the university." We got coffee, talked for 3 hours. She didn't ask about my car or my salary or whether I knew anyone impressive. She asked about the satellites. She asked about the actual work. When I explained what I do, making sure the signal connects when a rescue team needs GPS coordinates in a hurricane, she leaned forward. "That's beautiful. You're connecting people." First time in 6 years, a woman called my work beautiful. About a year after the anniversary party, Craig went to trial. He tried insanity. He tried blaming me. He tried blaming the economy. The jury didn't buy any of it. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, securities fraud, identity theft. 14 years, federal prison, no parole for at least 12. Frank took a plea deal, 5 years for bank fraud. At his age, that's effectively a life sentence. I felt something complicated about Frank. He got used by his own son, and that's its own kind of tragedy. I didn't have to go to the sentencing, but I went. Needed to close the door. Claire went with me and held my hand in the back of the courtroom. Craig looked nothing like the guy in the white linen pants. Tan completely gone, hair thinning, scared the way bullies always look when consequences finally show up in person. When the verdict was read, he scanned the gallery. Saw Linda sobbing into a handkerchief. Saw Nicole sitting alone, older looking, cheap blazer, no one next to her. And then his eyes found mine. He didn't say anything. He just slumped. He knew. The Honda Civic had run him off the road. Outside the courthouse, Nicole intercepted us on the steps. She saw Claire. She saw my new suit, navy, tailored. Claire had helped me pick it out. Something moved across Nicole's face that I couldn't quite name. "Owen," she said. Her voice was small. "I just wanted to say, I'm having a hard time. The rent's due. With Dad in prison, Mom is falling apart." She was asking me for money. After everything. I looked at her and felt nothing I expected to feel. No anger, no grief, no anything. Just this flat, quiet indifference. The feeling of looking at a neighborhood you used to live in and realizing you don't miss it at all. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "But that sounds like a problem for your family to solve." "I'm not family anymore, Nicole. You told me to leave your house, remember?" "Owen, please." "Come on," Claire said softly, squeezing my arm. "We've got that reservation." We walked away. Nicole said my name once more, but her voice got swallowed up by the street noise. A few months after that, I was cleaning out old storage boxes and found a tablet of Nicole's mixed in with my stuff by mistake. I knew the passcode. I turned it on. found a text thread with Craig from the weeks before the party. Her asking him for another transfer. Him saying he was stretched. Her saying I was starting to ask questions, getting suspicious. Craig promising her a condo in the city once the Hargrove deal closed. And Nicole's response, just hurry up. I can't stand pretending to listen to his boring work stories anymore. She knew. Maybe not the full scope of the fraud, maybe, but she knew he was broke. She knew she was stealing from me. And she was planning to leave the moment Craig hit it big. Whatever guilt I'd occasionally felt, that maybe I'd been too harsh, that maybe I'd burned down something that wasn't entirely wrong, evaporated on the spot. I wasn't the villain. I was the escapee. 3 years out now. I'm married to Claire. We have a small house in the hills, nothing like the McMansion with the too many columns. And it has a telescope on the back deck. We spend weekends looking at planets and not needing to explain ourselves to anyone. I got promoted again, director of operations. We're happy in the way that doesn't require an audience. Last month, Claire and I were at an Italian place downtown for our anniversary. I looked across the room and recognized a face. Dana, Greg's ex, clearing tables, looking exhausted. And at a corner table, eating quietly, were Linda and Nicole. Not talking, just sitting with their plates, staring into space. Linda looked frail. Nicole looked bitter in the way that sets into a person's face when they've been carrying resentment with nowhere to put it for too long. There was something on the table I couldn't make out. A small dessert, barely touched, and neither of them was looking at each other. I thought about going over, but then Claire laughed at something I said. Warm, genuine, the way she always laughs. And I turned back to her. What are you looking at? She asked. Nothing, I said. Just shadows. The best revenge isn't anger. It's not even justice. Though watching Craig get walked out in cuffs was genuinely satisfying, I won't lie. The best revenge is a life that doesn't need explaining. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done when that silence hit at the dinner table? Because that moment is where this whole thing turned. Let me know. Look, Owen's no superhero. He's a guy who spent 6 years being the invisible foundation of a marriage, while the people around him treated him like a leaky faucet you only call when something needs fixing. But when the moment came, he didn't yell. He didn't beg. He showed up with a PDF, forwarded an email to the FBI, and let the math do the talking. That's the move. Not anger, not drama, just clarity and the right documentation at the right time. Question for the comments. At what point would you have walked away? Because 6 years is a long time to be invisible. Drop it below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. We drop stories every day.